Hello, everybody. It's already an amazing day. I mean, I would have killed for a ticket if I wasn't a speaker. And I am very low tech, I have to warn you. But the good news is, I have brought you cake. So I don't have any kind of fancy gizmos or videos or groovy, funky music or any of that. It's like a few old pictures, which I'm going to waffle about. But I will, at the end of the day, you're going to be given a piece of lemon drizzle cake that I made yesterday and this morning. I look knackered because I've been making lemon drizzle cake for you all, right? Right, so there we are. Right. I look older than Mary Berry, but there we are. Right. My talk today, really, I could have done, like Neil mentioned, the things that are really passionate for me. They're about social media, about connection, about how we group together. I mean, this room, I know people can watch it on the old Whatsits, but this is amazing to be in this room, and that's what really excites me as a businesswoman, and used to be as a journalist when I used to do that. The connection thing is really what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it through food. And I have to warn you now, the first two paragraphs I'm going to waffle are quite sad. And if I get through this without crying, it's going to be a bloody miracle, right? It gets chirpier, so please stick with me. There are actually some laughs later on. On the screen there is my mother, Betty. This was actually in Soler in Mallorca, where we went for lots of family holidays. This was her the year before I was born. I'm not sure if she's actually pregnant or if I was conceived during this holiday. I can't work it out with the dates, but basically I was either a thought or I was happening. And this is her a hotel. We used to go and have lunch. It was quite a posh hotel for Mallorca in those days. And when I was a kid, we used to go there a lot for these amazing lunches with my mum and dad, and then we'd go to the beach and just muck around. And I went back with my husband, AJ, who's there, and recreated this picture. However, I didn't have my mum's stunning hair or stunning dress, which I'm very jealous of. This is my favourite picture of her. The reason I'm starting with her is because actually my business journey and my kind of move from being an employee to being someone who employs people, which I still can't quite believe I do, but in my house, is all about her. So the next couple of things I'm going to say are about her, and then I'll come back to her at the end. But there's some other people in here who also I love so much, who I'm going to talk about their food influence on me and what I'm trying to do in my stupidly small business, which is ridiculously hyper local. And as Neil said, we have a wall built, an imaginary wall, and I've had people offer me double the money if I will deliver beyond the mile, and I have to always say no. And it's just amazing, the power of when you say you can't give somebody something, immediately in business, that's what everybody wants. Anyway, so there's Mum. I was kneading bread dough when she died, just over a year ago. And I was in my kitchen, and it was the busiest. At this point, I was working solo. I didn't have anybody helping me. And I was in my kitchen, and I had 38 loaves of bread, which if you imagine in a normal kitchen, I don't have any large ovens or mixers. It's all by hand. And I had a huge bowl of dough, and my sister rang and told me that she'd died. In the following hours, 3 or 4 hours before my husband could get home, I sat on a chair in my kitchen, and I remember looking and thinking, there's another chair there. I can't move to that chair. That's how all-encompassing it was. She died very suddenly. She was quite old. She'd been in a nursing home, so it wasn't a surprise in that sense, but she died very suddenly. And I just remember looking at that chair repeatedly and thinking, I can't move to that chair. That's how fixed I was. 4 or 5 hours later, somehow my husband got me out of the kitchen, got me into the lounge, sat me down, gave me a very strong gin and tonic. Thank you for that. And I remember as I left the kitchen and he guided me out of the kitchen, I looked back. And of course, what had happened in this time that was my kind of Miss Havisham moment, my life absolutely froze and got kind of instantly cobwebbed and nothing was happening. But in that time, of course, the bread had other ideas. The 38 loaves in various stages of readiness, either in tins or in proving baskets or mixed up or baked or whatever, they all carried on. And I just remember looking back at the kitchen, not even beginning to understand how the kitchen would ever get tidied up because I couldn't do it and I had to go to London and everything. It was like a surreal Dali painting of the dripping things, you know, the dripping textures. Everywhere there was just this bread dough going down counters, going across tabletops. And I just thought, oh God, look at that mess. Who's going to clear it up? How will I ever recover? And somehow, I don't know when you did that actually, but my husband then cleared it all up, and so by the time I came down, the next morning, it was all done. And that little couple of hours was one of the most important couple of hours of my life because A, I had lost the person who'd inspired everything I've ever done, but particularly the food stuff. I'd lost the person who taught me how to bake when I was 8. She started teaching me how to bake. She was the person who showed me how to grow veg, so my allotment is all about her. She was the person who taught me that you just bloody get on with it. And the person who taught me you just bloody get on with it suddenly wasn't there anymore, and I still had to bloody get on with it. But also, I thought there's something there about bread, there's something there about food. Things go on, and we carry on, and somehow we get through. The second sad story, and I remind you, it gets cheerier. When I was 10, nearly 11, my dad died. My parents were older. My mum had me at 46. She kindly told me when I was 13 that she thought I was the menopause. Thanks, Mum. Still in therapy about that. But anyway, and my dad was 10 years older than her. So when I was 10, my parents were 55 and 65, right? They looked like my grandparents. And all my friends had groovy young mums. I was dead jealous. And when my dad died, because I was so young, I had no idea that, I knew he died, but I was completely shielded from it. And I was shielded from my mum's bereavement. And I think back now, I think, God, how I felt when she died. She must have felt like that when he died, times a million. But I never saw her cry. She never let me down. She always looked after me. She never once showed any stress or upset or heartbreak, and I have no idea how she did that. But one of the ways she did it was we started cooking together. So she'd already taught me how to bake basic bread, soda bread. She was Irish, so soda bread. And we used to, every weekend we'd make a cake. That was about it. But she seriously got into cooking with me from the time when I was just about 10. And we started getting into Supercook magazine. Now, Supercook was launched in the late 70s. It was 25p a week. And in South London, it was like we're all au fait now with Ottolenghi, etc. Right. Cast your mind back a generation. This was when we didn't have olive oil. Olive oil was something you got from the chemist. Garlic was a mystery. We were working class, second generation Irish family. We didn't have Elizabeth David in our orbit, right? So we just ate meat and potatoes, really. And they were lovely. Mainly potatoes, if I look back. But my mum started buying this magazine every week. And it's alphabetical. And every week it would have, see how rubbish I am? Like, that's completely rubbish, right? But it was alphabetical. So you'd have, and it was global food, and it was a how-to, and then all these recipes. And we just used to work through it. I mean, we did dodge some of the slightly weirder things. I'll never forget suggesting to my mum that we made frog's legs. I can't tell you what she said, but it's where I learned to swear. But we just chose every week 2 or 3 recipes, and we just cooked in her tiny, tiny, tiny kitchen. Cooked our way through what I now realise was her huge grief. So those two things are connected for me. It's about what you do when you are broken and how food can actually put you back together again, although when I was 10 I didn't realise. The next thing that happened, I love this picture. Right, the next thing that happened was I went to secondary school about 3 months later, and my first friend I made there, Louisa, hello Louisa, she was just Louisa to me. And then when I went for tea at her house, I realised that she was from an Italian family. And this is Bianca and Tony Del Guercio. I had no idea how lucky I was to make friends with her. It's only years and years later. Tony is from Calabria. Bianca from the Amalfi Coast, so southern Italian. Both absolutely passionate foodies. They would never have described themselves as foodies. If I can just put it this way, when I was, I think it was 12, I was treading grapes that Tony had brought back from Italy in what became their lounge. At the time, it was a kind of building site, and we were treading grapes. I'd never really seen grapes before. We didn't have wine. You bought cooking wine, those little bottles of cooking wine. We didn't have wine. We had kind of quite a bit of whiskey in our house, but not any wine. And instead, I was making this wine, and then I would go for these teas at her house, and there would be a pasta course, and then there would be an amazing main course, and then there would be fruit, and then there would be cheese, and there would be wine when I was 12. And it was gorgeous. I got really squiffy once, and I didn't really try that again. But anyway, and then Bianca, I remember her teaching me how to make a ragu sauce. It took half a day. And she told me that if I ever did it any other way, it would always be wrong. And whenever I make ragu now, it's Bianca's recipe. And I split my time as a teenager between that household and my household. So all it was about was food you know how to make, stuff you've grown, stuff you know the person, if you haven't grown it, you know the person who does, stuff that takes time and is all about love. Now, slightly different image. We were in Cardiff a couple of weeks ago, supermarket, buying a paper, and I saw this packet. They are strawberry puffs. I actually saw the packet and thought, oh my God, those ingredients have been printed in like 20 languages. And then I thought, oh no, God help us, that's all in English. Those are the ingredients for strawberry puffs. I love strawberry puffs. I make them, they're beautiful. I have about 6 ingredients in my strawberry puffs. And I had to choose one image to sum up what's gone wrong with where we are with food. And that, for me, at the moment, is the image. Look at all the crap. Most of those things, I've Googled all of those things. Even though I've Googled some of them, I still don't know what they are. And the packet weighed nothing. I picked the packet up and it was like feathers, right? This, to me, just symptomizes where we've gone wrong with food. The culture, I'm so lucky that I came from a household and I made friends with somebody from another household where there was never any additives, there was never any idea that you wouldn't make your own food. And I know that I'm just going to say now, I'm not trying to be Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall. I'm not posh, never have been. I'm talking about simple food that you make yourself and you know what's in it and you know where it's come from, and then you share it and give it as an act of love. That's really what I'm all about. That's what my business is all about. This is what I'm really against. And I know we haven't all got time to make food every day. I know we all use supermarkets. I go to the supermarket sometimes, I admit, right? I don't always make it to Riverside Farmers Market, okay? Hands up. But I do know what I'm eating, and I do know what's in the food that I give to other people. And that's really what I'm here to talk about today. Okay, so what I wanted to suggest was on the, as you look at it, the left-hand side is appetite for me. This is what food's about, what we kind of should be doing when we eat, when we cook for other people. And on the, as you look at it, the right-hand side is what I've called hunger, which is where I think we're going wrong. And it's just really about the idea that food, at its simplest and its most beautiful, is about a connection. It's about making food for somebody else, gathering people together, and just having that moment where you share and you enjoy and you've made something and you give it to somebody else. My business was set up to be a delivery, so it's by bike and we deliver to the doorstep. So you always get a little bag every week. You don't know what you're going to get. It's a surprise. And the idea was very much that I would, in the beginning, take the food that I'd made with my own hands, hand it over to somebody and talk to them about it. Now I have Harry, who works for me, who's fantastic, and much better cyclist than I am, much faster. But he bakes with me, so I would never have anybody just do deliveries because that would become detached. And the idea was that you would always meet the person who'd made the food for you. You'd hear the stories, and we would, in turn, get to know you, know your kids, know your pets, talk about the weather, talk about the garden, or whatever, just for a few minutes, to be the antithesis of what I think has gone wrong with the food culture that most of us live on. So those are just some thoughts about what good food's about and what bad food is about. And what I'm trying to argue today is that we need to kind of embrace, without getting all kind of fancy and middle class and posh about it, just really embrace getting back to basics and not having a culture where we spend £27 billion a year on ready meals, which is what we spent last year, where we throw away £7 million worth of food, half of which can be absolutely safely used, and where we don't ever put our hands into what we're eating. So we become detached, we become alienated, it becomes soulless, it becomes unhappy. And instead of that, what I'd like to suggest is that we try and get a sense of connection back. Even if it's once a month, you just make something, share it with somebody. Give it to somebody who is in need in some points. Okay, so just after my mum died, this is a happy story about a sad thing. Just after my mum died, 5 days after she died, someone who I'd met, a food blogger, Nikki Vivian, hello Nikki, who I'd met a few times, but I didn't know very well. She'd come and done a class with me. She turned up on my doorstep with this pie, steak pie, bloody amazing. And she put a 1 on for the 1 Mile Bakery. So she bothered to cut out a puff pastry 1. That was my worst ever day of bereavement. I had been crying all night. I was in a dressing gown. I looked absolutely, if you think I look tired now, right, I look really, really bad. And I actually almost didn't answer the door because I couldn't bear to deal with anybody. And she was there, and she just gave me that pie. In fact, I've still got the dish, Nikki, I'm sorry. And it's a year on. It's a really nice dish. She gave me the pie, and she said, I'm not going to stop. She could see the state I was in. I'm not going to stop. I just thought you might want something to eat. It's one of the kindest things anybody has ever done for me, and was the beginning of me recovering from what I was in. We had that night. I managed to cook some potatoes, weirdly. I cooked some potatoes. My mother showed me how. And we had a meal. It was the first meal we'd had. And then the next day, we had the rest of it with some different vegetables I managed to cook. And it felt like the most miraculous thing to have a dinner. And it was a hug through food. And that's what I'm really trying to argue we should all try and do. Make food that has a story or a meaning to you. So this is some roasted raspberry and vanilla jam that I made for my customers a couple of months ago, no, last autumn. And this is the jam pot that my mum used to use. The reason this means something to me, not only does she used to make all her jam in it, but this is the pot she took into my school when my school teachers suggested that they would make Seville marmalade. Turned out none of them had a clue. None of them had a clue how to make marmalade. So my mum had to be kind of brought in to show them. And I have never been as proud as when my mum walked in with that pot and just said, right, and taught all my teachers how to make marmalade. And then every year afterwards, they all made marmalade. And then they kind of forgot to mention my mum, which annoyed me. But it's that pot, whenever I use it, it is like she's with me, and it is like a hug. Food that has stories. This is an Italian bread. It's a rosemary bread, Rosemarino bread. And this is a 16th century loaf from Italy. It's got rock salt on the top. It's made with loads of rosemary inside, but it's got rock salt on the top. And this was the d'Este, the aristocratic d'Este family. They used to put diamonds on the top of their bread. Fancy. Actually, at that point, salt to ordinary people was almost as expensive as diamonds. And so now it's made with rock salt. So I love those. It's not a personal connection, but I love food with a story. Hot cross buns, ritual, ceremony, celebrations, holidays. I make my own hot cross buns. I can't tell you how much that transforms Easter. They're a bit of a nightmare sometimes. You have to do all the crosses and everything. But they taste like the best thing ever. Who could possibly do Christmas without these fellas, right? If you make your own ones, they're really simple, and I'm going to explain in a second how simple all this is. A birthday. This was my husband's birthday a couple of years ago. Went away for the weekend, and this is an apple and spiced date cake. It's just not a birthday unless you have a cake. If you make the cake yourself and give it to somebody else, they will love you. If they don't already love you and you want them to love you, that's how to do it. And this is my lemon drizzle cake. This is what you're all going to get a bit of later. It's my mum's recipe. She loved a bit of lemon drizzle. We sort of lived on it. That and potatoes, we just kind of managed. And whiskey, when I was a bit older. This is her recipe, which I have updated. So she would be horrified at this embellishment. I put dried corn flour on the top because that was her favourite flour. She loved all blue flowers. So that's what I've done. You'll see in your little samples that I've given you. And that means everything to me because it's her recipe, but with me there. This is a picture of some bread and some soup, which is what I do as a business. I deliver bread, soup and jam. What I want you to do is I want you to eat your cake, enjoy it. If you don't eat cake, give it to everybody loves cake, just give it to somebody else. There's slight size discrepancies, so if you've got a bigger piece, I don't want any fights breaking out, right? Just be kind to each other and share. What I want to suggest, I was going to give you all a recipe, and then I thought, no, that's too easy. If I give you a bit of paper, you're just going to lose it, or sit on it, or, whatever. Write each other's Twitter names on it or something. I'm so modern. Right. So what I want to do instead is I want you, if you're interested, to connect with me on Twitter or on Facebook or by email. My website is onemilebakery.com. You can find all my stuff on there. You get in touch with me, and I will give you a couple of free recipes. I normally charge quite a lot of money to teach bread making. I'm going to do this for free as long as you promise me you'll make it and give it to somebody who you love. Thank you.